The bedroom window was open. The candles were still burning. The wedding guests were gone. The musicians had packed up and left. And on the silk pillow where a bride should have been resting, there was only a handwritten note. 7 words. 7 words that made Korea's most feared mafia boss read it twice, then a third time, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. If you come looking for me, everyone you love will die. Choi Min-woo stood there in his tailored wedding suit, the smell of flower arrangements still heavy in the air, and felt something he had not felt in 15 years of running one of Korea's most powerful criminal syndicates. He felt helpless. Her wedding shoes were beside the bed. Her bouquet was on the floor. She was gone. And the worst part, the part that would keep him up every night for the next 3 months, was that only 12 hours before she vanished, he had looked her in the eye and promised that no one would ever hurt her again. He had meant it. If you're just joining us, welcome. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Now, stay with us. Because what really happened that night is nothing like what it looks like. Imani Brooks was 29 years old, and she had learned early that the world did not hand you anything. She grew up in Atlanta, the daughter of a schoolteacher mother and a father who fixed cars in a garage that smelled like motor oil and old coffee. Her parents were the kind of people who laughed loudly and loved loudly, and she had inherited all of that from them. The warmth, the stubbornness, the belief that dignity meant more than status. When she was 24, within 8 months of each other, she lost them both. Her mother went first, a stroke, quick and without warning. Her father followed, as if he simply could not figure out how to be in the world without her. Imani had stood at 2 funerals in less than a year, and after the second one, she looked around at the apartment she had grown up in and understood that she had to leave. Not to run, but because staying would mean slowly disappearing inside her grief. She chose Seoul. She had studied Korean in college. Her mother had loved Korean dramas, and Imani had picked up the language to watch them together without subtitles. It had been their private world, just the 2 of them on the couch on Sunday evenings. Coming to Korea felt, in some strange way, like carrying her mother with her. She found work quickly at a luxury hotel in Gangnam, taking double shifts, learning the rhythms of a city that moved faster than anywhere she had ever lived. She was saving money. She had a plan, an African cultural cafe, somewhere in Seoul, where anyone from anywhere could sit down and feel like they belonged. She told her coworkers about it during break times. Most of them nodded politely. 1 or 2 actually believed her. Imani did not need anyone to believe her. She just needed time. She was good at her job, patient with rude customers, unshakable when other staff underestimated her. She had a particular way of handling difficult people. She did not argue. She did not retreat. She simply stayed exactly who she was, and most people eventually ran out of energy trying to diminish her. She spoke Korean well enough that guests were sometimes visibly startled when she answered them in their own language. She had learned to find that funny. Choi Min-woo had not chosen the life either, not exactly. He was 35, the eldest son of Choi Byung-soo, the man who had built the Choi Syndicate from a small protection operation in Busan into one of the most influential criminal networks in South Korea. Min-woo had been groomed for the role the way other men's sons were groomed for law firms or medical practices. He had been taught to read people, to identify weakness, to make decisions without hesitation. He had learned those lessons well. Too well. By the time he took over from his father at 31, his reputation was already carved in stone. Brilliant, cold, unreachable. He did not socialize. He did not date. He trusted almost no one, and the 2 or 3 people he did trust, he guarded with everything he had. The one wound that never fully closed was his younger sister, Soo-yeon. She had died 5 years earlier. Officially an accident, a fall from the cliffs outside the family estate in Busan. Min-woo had never believed it. He had spent years quietly looking into it, turning over rocks, following threads that always seemed to go cold before they led anywhere. The guilt was constant, low-level, like a sound he could never quite locate. He had not been there the night she died. He had been handling business on the other side of the country. He had never stopped wondering whether it would have made a difference if he had stayed. He carried that with him everywhere. Into every boardroom, every negotiation, every silence. The evening Imani first encountered Min-woo was a Tuesday in October, unremarkable by every measure except one. The hotel's regular VIP hostess had called in sick, and Imani was asked to cover the private dining room, where a reservation had been made under a name she did not recognize. She went in with her notepad, introduced herself in Korean, and waited. Min-woo arrived with two men who flanked him like furniture. He sat down without looking at her. She asked for his order. He gave it without looking up from his phone. She wrote it down and left. She came back with the food, set everything down correctly, refilled the water before he asked, and that was when he finally looked up. Not because she had done anything dramatic, but because she had done everything precisely right and had not once tried to impress him. He was used to people trying to impress him. "You're not Korean," he said in Korean. "No," she said. "I'm not. Your accent is good. Thank you." She left. He watched her walk out and said nothing to the men beside him. But he noticed. He came back 3 more times over the following 2 weeks. He never made a scene, never asked for her by name, never acknowledged that he recognized her. But he always sat in her section. And she always served him exactly the same way, professionally, warmly, without performance. On the 4th visit, he left a tip that was more than her daily wage. She stood looking at it for a long moment, then went to the kitchen and told no one. What Imani did not know, what she could not have known, was that her life was about to be decided in a room she had never entered by people who had no idea who she actually was. The Choi family elders had gathered in the private study of the Busan estate to address a growing problem. A rival syndicate from Incheon was pressing for alliance through marriage. They wanted Min-woo to marry the daughter of their chief. It would have bound the two organizations together in a way that made both sides uncomfortable. The Choi elders did not want the entanglement. They needed a different solution. Someone proposed an alternative. Min-woo should marry someone entirely outside the world. An outsider, someone with no political or criminal ties, someone who could serve as a symbol that the Choi syndicate was moving toward legitimacy. The marriage would be public, clean, visible. It would neutralize the Incheon pressure without creating new alliances. They needed someone who could not be leveraged, someone expendable, if it came to it. One of the elders had seen Imani at the hotel during a dinner the previous month. He had noted how she handled herself. He had her file pulled. He brought it to the meeting. The decision took less than an hour. Imani Brooks, 29. No family. No connections. No complications. Min-woo was told, not asked. He sat across from his uncle, Choi Song-hak, the man who had raised him after his father's health began to fail, the man he trusted above almost anyone, and listened to the plan laid out with the same calm efficiency applied to every other business decision the family made. Min-woo said no. Song-hak reminded him of what the alternative meant for the organization, for their people, for everything they had built. Min-woo went quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Imani was approached at work by 2 men in suits who told her she had been selected for a private meeting with a representative of a notable family. She assumed it was a job offer. Within 48 hours, she understood that it was not. She was told, not asked, that she would be compensated generously, that her visa situation would be resolved permanently, and that her participation would ensure the safety of people around her. She sat in that meeting room and looked at the men across the table with an expression that gave away nothing. She went home that night, sat on the floor of her small apartment, and did not sleep. By morning, she had weighed every option she could think of. She agreed. Not because she was weak. Because she was smart enough to understand the position she was in, and brave enough to walk into it with her eyes open. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, drop a comment below. Tell us what you would have done in Imani's position. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button and stay with us. The wedding was held at the Choi estate in Busan on a Saturday in December. It was not a small affair. The estate itself was enormous. Old stone, high ceilings, manicured grounds that ran to the cliff's edge above the sea. There were guests Imani did not know, flowers she had not chosen, a dress that had been selected for her. She stood in front of the mirror before the ceremony and breathed slowly, the way her mother had taught her to breathe when things felt too large. One breath, then another. She thought about the cafe. She thought about her mother watching Korean dramas in their living room in Atlanta. She thought, I am here. I am still here. That is enough for now. Min-woo was waiting at the altar with the composed expression of a man who had decided, somewhere between last night and this morning, that if he had to do this, he would do it right. He looked at her when she walked in, really looked at her, and something shifted slightly in the set of his jaw. Not tenderness. Not yet. But recognition. This was the woman who had served him his food 4 times without once trying to flatter him. She deserved better than this.
So, did he?
The ceremony proceeded. Vows were spoken in Korean and English. Photographs were taken. During the reception, beneath the sound of formal dinner conversation and the clinking of glasses, something small happened that neither of them could have predicted. He noticed she was barely eating. He noticed the tension around her eyes that her composure was working hard to hide. He leaned close and said, quietly in English, "You didn't choose this." She looked at him, a long, direct look. "Neither did you," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "After tonight, you'll have your own room, your own space. I'll make sure of it." She nodded. It was not romance. It was not love. But it was the first honest thing that had passed between them, and both of them felt it. Later in the evening, while Min-woo was occupied with guests, Imani slipped away from the main hall toward the quieter back corridor of the estate, looking for a bathroom. She found one, and on her way back, she passed a door that was not quite closed. 2 voices came through the gap, men speaking in lowered tones. She was about to move on when she heard her name. She stopped. She pressed herself against the wall. She listened. The witness has to disappear before sunrise. A pause. Not the husband. Her. She saw the ledger in the study when they gave her the tour. It's too much risk. Another voice, tighter. Song-hak won't like delays. Song-hak ordered it. Imani stood in that hallway and did not breathe. Her heart was hammering so hard, she was certain they could hear it through the door. She counted to 5. Then she walked, steadily, calmly, exactly as if she had heard nothing, back toward the main hall. She smiled at a guest who caught her eye. She picked up a glass of water. She did not touch it. Her mind was already moving. The ledger they mentioned, she had seen it. During the estate tour that morning, one of the staff had opened the study briefly, and on the desk she had noticed an open book filled with columns of numbers, names, dates. She had not thought about it. She had not needed to think about it then. She needed to think about it now. She spent the next 2 hours moving carefully through the estate. She found her way back to the study. The door was unlocked. Inside, she found the ledger, and beneath it, a folder of photographs she was not supposed to see. Faces. Dates. Payments. Records of transactions stretching back years. And near the bottom of the folder, a photograph that made her stop completely. A young Korean woman, smiling. Standing at the very cliff's edge, she could see from the estate window. On the back of the photograph, written in ink, Suyun, November, and a date from 5 years ago. Beside it, a handwritten note she could only partially translate, but the words she could read were enough. Ordered. Confirmed. Song-hak. Imani stood in that study and understood exactly what she was holding. Min-woo's sister had not fallen. She had been murdered. And the man who had ordered it, the man who had raised Min-woo, the man Min-woo trusted more than anyone alive, was the same man who had just ordered her eliminated tonight. She took the photographs. She took the relevant pages from the ledger. She folded them carefully and tucked them beneath the fabric of her dress. Then she walked out of the study, closed the door behind her, and kept walking. At 11:30, a knock came at the bedroom door. She had gone upstairs under the pretense of exhaustion. The knock was soft 3 times, then silence. Then a voice she half recognized from the corridor. "If you love your husband, you need to leave. Right now." The window. She opened the door a crack. A young man, one of the junior household staff, looked at her with an expression that was equal parts fear and urgency. "I work for a man who has been watching Song-hak for 2 years," he whispered. "We have maybe 20 minutes. Come now or don't come." Imani looked at him for 2 full seconds. Then she stepped back into the room, pulled off her wedding heels, set them beside the bed, and followed him out the window. She did not write the note to be cruel. She wrote it because it was the only way to make Min-woo stop looking long enough for her to do what she needed to do. If he came after her, Song-hak's men would follow him, and they would find her before she could get the evidence somewhere safe. The note was not a goodbye. It was a calculated move, the hardest one she had ever made. She left it on the pillow with hands that were steady, even though every other part of her was not. By the time the household discovered the empty room, Imani was already 40 minutes away, in the back of a car she did not know, holding evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful men in Korea. Min-woo read the note. He read it again. He did not panic, not visibly. He gave instructions with the quiet efficiency of a man who had handled crises before, even when his hands were not entirely steady. He sent men to the cliffs. He sent men to the roads. He contacted informants in every district. The working theory in the organization was betrayal. The African wife had taken something, run to someone, sold access. Min-woo listened to all of it and believed none of it. He had looked her in the eye enough times to know that Imani Brooks did not run from things. She ran toward them. Something had pushed her out of that window. He needed to find out what. Song-hak was at his shoulder through most of it, calm, measured, exactly as helpful as a trusted uncle should be. He suggested the rival syndicate from Incheon might have recruited her. He mentioned that outsiders were always a risk. He reminded Min-woo, gently, that he had warned against the marriage from the start. Min-woo nodded at all of it, and began watching his uncle very closely. 3 weeks passed, then 6, then 8. The trail seemed cold everywhere it was supposed to be warm. And then, through a contact in Taejun who owed him a significant favor, Min-woo received a single message. No name. No explanation. Only an address and the words, "Come alone. She is safe." He came alone. The abandoned lighthouse stood on a headland north of Sokcho, the kind of place that only existed on maps people had stopped using. Min-woo arrived as the sun was going down, turning the water the color of copper. He found her standing inside, at the top of the stairs, looking out through a salt-fogged window. She turned when she heard him. She looked different, thinner, more precise, the way people look when they have been afraid for a long time and have learned to live inside it without being consumed. Neither of them spoke immediately. "You got my note," she said finally. "Everyone got your note," he said. His voice was flat. Not angry, something worse.
Exhausted.
She held out a folder. He looked at it but did not take it yet. "Before you open that," she said, "I need you to understand that what I'm about to show you cannot be unseen. And once you know it, everything changes. Your organization, your family, everything you've built your life on." "Tell me," he said. "Your uncle killed your sister," she said. She said it plainly, because she had learned by now that there was no gentle way to deliver something like this, and prettying it up would be a form of dishonesty she could not afford. Soo-yeon didn't fall. Song-hak ordered it, 5 years ago, when she found financial records linking him to an international crime network that operates outside your syndicate. A network he has been feeding resources and intelligence to for 15 years, using your family's money and your family's name. Min-woo stood very still. The silence lasted a long time. "Show me," he said. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. She showed him everything. The photographs, the ledger pages, the financial records she and the retired investigator, a man who had worked the original case of Soo-yeon's death and never stopped believing it was wrong, had spent weeks assembling and verifying. Min-woo went through it slowly, methodically, the way he went through everything. When he reached the photograph of his sister at the cliff's edge, he stopped. He stood there for a very long time. Imani did not speak. She did not reach for him. She simply stayed present. Sometimes that is the only thing you can do for someone in the middle of the worst moment of their life. When he finally looked up, his eyes were dry, but something behind them had fundamentally changed. Why, he said, not to her, not really. But she answered anyway. Because you deserve to know. Because she deserved to be seen. And because if I had stayed and said nothing, he would have had me killed, and your sister's murder would have stayed buried for another 15 years.
He was quiet again.
Then, I need one day. You have it, she said. And then I need you to stay somewhere safe for the next 48 hours. She almost smiled. I've been staying somewhere safe for 8 weeks. He looked at her, the full weight of what she had carried alone settling onto him. I know, he said quietly. I know you have. This is the moment where everything changes, and if you're still here with us, watching this story unfold, we want to hear from you. Comment "Truth always wins" below and share this video with someone who needs to hear a story like this one. And if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Join our community. We make these stories for you. What happened next happened fast, as consequences tend to when they have been 15 years in the building. Min-woo returned to Busan. He said nothing to Song-hak, not immediately. He spent 24 hours quietly confirming what the documents already proved, pulling threads from sources inside his own organization that he had never fully used before. By the time he sat across from his uncle in the private study, the same study where Imani had found the folder, he had everything he needed. Song-hak looked at him across the desk and seemed, at first, to believe this was a routine meeting. He had survived 15 years of secrets. He was practiced at composure. But when Min-woo opened the folder and set it between them, the composure cracked. Not all at once, but in the particular way of a structure that has been under pressure for too long. Song-hak began to speak. He offered explanations. He said Soo-yeon had been reckless, that she had not understood the implications of what she had found, that the decision had been made to protect the family. Min-woo listened to all of it without interrupting. When his uncle finished, Min-woo said 5 words. She was my sister, uncle. And then he stood up, opened the door, and let the men who had been waiting outside come in. Song-hak was handed over not to the rival syndicate, not to the streets, but to the authorities through a contact Min-woo had maintained for exactly this kind of contingency. The financial records Imani had recovered were enough. The case built quickly. Within 3 months, Choi Song-hak was facing prosecution on charges that included fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide. The international network he had been feeding began to unravel from multiple points simultaneously, as law enforcement in 3 countries followed the threads the ledger provided. 6 months later, Seoul looked the same from the outside, the way cities always do when the earthquakes happen beneath the surface rather than on top of it. The Choi Syndicate was not the same organization it had been. Min-woo had made decisions, hard ones, the kind that cost him alliances and revenue, and the loyalty of people who had benefited from the way things were. He had started the process of restructuring, of pulling the organization out of operations that couldn't survive scrutiny, of building something that could eventually exist in daylight. It was slow. It was expensive. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, and very probably the most important. Imani opened her cafe on a Saturday in late May. It was in Mapo District, a neighborhood she had liked from the first month she arrived in Seoul, full of students and artists and people who ate their meals slowly and stayed to talk. The space was small, but she had decorated it with care, fabrics her mother would have recognized, music that moved between continents, a menu that required explanation and rewarded curiosity. On opening day, she stood behind the counter and watched Korean families sit beside Nigerian students, beside French backpackers, beside a table of elderly women who had come in on a whim and stayed for 2 hours. She thought about her mother. She thought about her father in his garage. She thought, I made it. I actually made it. Min-woo came in quietly, near closing time. He sat at the corner table. She brought him water, without being asked. He looked around the room the way he looked at everything, carefully, taking inventory. You built this, he said. I did, she said. A pause. It suits you, he said. She looked at him. Are you eating or are you just going to sit there being observant? He almost smiled. Both, he said. They talked that evening until the chairs were up on every other table. Not about Song-hak. Not about the night in the lighthouse. Not about any of it. They talked about her parents. about Soo-yeon when he was ready, which was slowly, and with the care of someone learning how to carry a grief instead of being crushed under it. They talked about what they both wanted, now that the weight had shifted. 3 months after that evening, on a Saturday morning, with no Mafia elders in the room, no calculations being made about alliances or expendability or political convenience, Choi Min-woo and Imani Brooks stood in a small garden in Seoul and made a choice they had not been asked to make the first time. This time it was only theirs. The dress was not selected for her. The vows were not translated from formal Korean into diplomatic English. The whole thing lasted 40 minutes and was witnessed by 9 people, including a retired investigator who had never stopped working a case he believed in, and a young member of the household staff who had knocked on a bedroom door at the right moment and changed everything. There is a kind of love that does not arrive the way we expect love to arrive, quietly, easily, through the door we left open. Some of it comes through crisis. Some of it comes through the moment someone sees exactly who you are in the worst possible circumstances and chooses to stay in the room anyway. Imani Brooks did not run from a forced marriage. She walked into one with her eyes open, discovered a truth that could have gotten her killed, and carried it, alone, afraid, and completely resolved, until she could place it in the hands of the person it belonged to. Choi Min-woo did not become a better man because he fell in love. He became a better man because he finally had a reason to be honest about what he actually wanted his life to be. The love came after, as it sometimes does. After the fear, after the reckoning, after the grief, after the long, slow work of becoming the kind of person who deserves to be loved back. The cafe is still open. It does not have a Mafia name on the deed. It has hers. What would you have done if you had been standing in that hallway, hearing your name through a door you were never meant to be near? Would you have taken those documents? Would you have run? Tell us in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story moved you, share it with someone tonight. Stories like this one are only worth telling if they reach the people who need them.
Subscribe.
Our next story is already waiting for you, and it asks an even harder question. The African nurse saved a dying Korean billionaire. His family accused her of murder. What does it cost to do the right thing when no one believes you? We'll see you there.